Hi friends, it's Valerie. Welcome back to this week's What's for Dinner. If you're new here, I would love if you would hit that subscribe button and join my YouTube family. Today I have 3 inspirational meals for you again, and I hope that you enjoy them as much as we did. And don't forget to leave a like or a comment down below. It really does help my channel. So let's get started. The first recipe I'm making is Sloppy Joe cornbread casserole. I'm halving the recipe that I'll have linked for you. So in a bowl, I'm adding 1 egg, and I'm just going to go ahead and whisk that up. And I'm going to just basically make the cornbread. So I'm using 1 box of Jiffy cornbread mix, and I am following the directions on the box for the amount of milk, which is 1/3 cup, because the recipe calls for 1 1/3 cup, and even if I half that, that's just way more milk than this box called for, so I don't really see the necessary point in that. So I'm just doing 1/3 cup, and then I'm going to add in my just dry cornbread mix and just whisk that together until it's nice and smooth. And then I'm taking an 8x8 pan versus a 9x13 because again I'm halving it, and I'm just greasing that, and I don't really use cooking spray, so I just put a little butter in there. And now I'm just going to go ahead and put that batter into the bottom of that, smooth it out, and I'm going to go ahead and bake this at 350 degrees for about 20 minutes. At that temp and time, it shouldn't be completely baked, which is what you want because we're going to add some things on top and then we'll continue to bake it. And while that was baking, I just went and got started on my meat. So I'm taking 1 pound of ground beef, and I'm just going to go ahead and break that up with my meat chopping tool and brown that until it's pretty much completely cooked. And I will go ahead and season that in a minute here. But I will just show you me continue. I break mine up really fine. That's how I prefer it. That's your preference on how big you want to leave your pieces of meat. And the recipe didn't call for this, but I did add some Worcestershire sauce, maybe from a teaspoon to a tablespoon's worth. Didn't really measure that. And it didn't call for, oh, maybe it did call for garlic powder. So I'm also adding in the teaspoon of garlic powder, and then I'm adding in 1/2 cup of ketchup. I didn't half the garlic powder because I like garlic. And then I'm adding in 1 tablespoon of brown sugar and a teaspoon of yellow mustard. And I'm just going to go ahead and stir that all together till your meat gets nice and coated with all those ingredients and they all mix together. This is basically making your sloppy Joe sauce. And I pulled that cornbread out of the oven, and I'm taking a can of drained corn, and I'm trying to use about half of it, but I did go a little extra because I just like corn, and I just kind of covered it with whatever looked about right for a nice layer. And now we're just going to go ahead and take that sloppy Joe meat and just like evenly distribute that. I'm kind of putting little like dollops of it all around before I kind of smooth it out or pat it out because I didn't want to disturb that whole layer of corn. And also, I didn't know how set up this cornbread was. It looked pretty good to me, like pretty set. Maybe it's just not all the way cooked, but I also didn't want to disturb that too much since I wasn't sure what was going on under that top layer. And now we're just topping that with some cheese. It calls for 1.5 cups I'm having, so 3/4 cup of cheese is around what I'm going for, but I kind of decided you do what you want when it comes to cheese. And I put this back in the oven for an additional 15 minutes. There it is out of the oven, just cheese is melted, the cornbread is cooked up. If you use hand-grated cheese, it will look more melted on top than, that bagged kind. But I was trying to keep this quick and easy. That's what I was going for on this night. That's what I've been going for over these past couple weeks as much as I can. And I served this with some just steamed bagged vegetables. And this is a meal we really liked. We both really like when there's like a layer of meat and cornbread is added. Like, we both really like cornbread, so very tasty. This next meal is beef Milanesa. To start off, you're going to need some dishes with breadcrumbs and flour, maybe about 1/2 cup of flour and 1 cup of breadcrumbs. This could vary depending on the amount of meat you're using. And then I'm taking 2 eggs and just kind of whisking those together with 1 tablespoon of lemon juice. And for those breadcrumbs, I was using Italian style. You could use plain, but I like the additional flavor that the Italian style gives. So these are going to be your 3 like containers you'll dip into. So you're going to take some flat cut steak, like beef steak. This is like a petite sirloin, like a thin cut. You could also do this with chicken. That's how I like it, but I was doing beef this night. And you're going to dip that in your flour. Then you're going to dip that in your egg mixture. and then you'll dip that in your breadcrumb mixture. I'm trying my best here to show it for you. I only have like a limited space there for you, but you get the gist of all that, and I'm not going to show me doing it to all of my meat. Also, this piece was really large, so were all my pieces. I decided with the rest of them to kind of like cut them into half because it was just a lot easier for me that way to maneuver them, and just do whatever works best for you. If you have, large dishes that you could dip this in and large frying pan areas, you do whatever works for you. Now I went ahead and added half a cup of butter to a large skillet over medium to medium high heat, and I'm going to just cook my Milanesa on each side for about 3 minutes. And I wasn't going to include this footage because it was just me doing it on the side, but I figured this is a good way to show you how to doctor up some refried beans by just taking a can, adding some garlic powder, some onion powder, and a little bit of cumin, and I just stir that all together, and I add a little bit of milk, no more than 1/4 cup. I just kind of eye that depending how thick you want the beans, and then just a good little handful of some cheddar cheese. I just had extra sharp. It's just a little bit of a bag that I had left over, and I stir that together, and this makes such a big difference in like how refried beans can taste compared to the can. I even add a little bit extra salt, and I like to place my Milanesa on a rack like this, like a wire rack, so that it doesn't get soggy and it helps it drain. And I also set my pan in the oven while I'm frying the rest of them so they don't get all cold. I serve this with those beans. I had some leftover Spanish rice, so I just served it with that. A little bit of cucumbers and tomatoes chopped up with some dressing. This was a really good meal. I do prefer it with chicken, but I'm gonna take this as a huge win because my boyfriend loves this meal in general at a restaurant, and he said that this was better than any restaurant he had it at. So I'm definitely gonna take that as a win and be very happy with how that came out. So I hope that you enjoy that. This last meal is creamy garlic Parmesan shrimp. To my large skillet over medium-high heat, I'm adding a tablespoon of olive oil and about a tablespoon of butter. The recipe didn't call for that at this point, but I like to cook my shrimp in a little bit of butter as well. So now I'm adding in a pound of cleaned shrimp that I took the tails off of. You could leave those on if you prefer. And I'm just going to go and season those with some salt, some black pepper, and some Old Bay, which is typically what I always use on my shrimp if I can, if I have any. It really does bring out that seafood flavor, which I really enjoy. And you're going to want to go ahead and let those cook for a couple minutes on each side, making sure that they're no longer like a transparent and that they're pink all the way through. You can stir them around like I am, use tongs to flip them. I'm just kind of stirring them around, and then the ones that didn't flip, I'll use my little spatula here because I really didn't want to dirty even another utensil at this point. And yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and do that and make sure that they get cooked on both sides for just a couple minutes each till they're no longer translucent. And once they were all cooked up, I went ahead and just removed them from the pan. And there's still a little bit of juices left in that pan, but that's fine. I left it, and I'm adding in 2 tablespoons of butter, and I let that melt. And now I'm going to add in 6 cloves of minced garlic to that, and just stir that around your butter. Let that saute for a good 30 seconds. It'll become nice and fragrant. And I'm using half a cup of chicken broth here instead of white wine. You can just go ahead and add that in. And I just give that all a good mix, and we're going to let that go ahead and reduce to half. And while that is doing its thing, I'm cooking up about 14 ounces of some linguine pasta in some nice salted water. Once it was cooked, I drained it, and I'm just like adding in some butter, some olive oil. I'll show you a few things that I added in along the way here. But I'm just kind of letting that sit while I get back to my sauce. So now back to this sauce, you're going to go ahead and add in 1.5 cups of, it calls for reduced fat cream. I just use heavy cream. I don't think I had the full 1.5 cups, so maybe 1/4 cup of it is milk. I just mix in with it. And I'm going to go ahead and stir that and let that continue to simmer. And add some salt and some pepper. And let that just continue to simmer. I would cool it on the salt part though. Add some salt, but don't go crazy with it because your Parmesan is like a very salty cheese. And I also added some of that Parmesan into that pasta because why not? And even a little pasta water that helped me thin it out a bit. So now that that sauce has thickened some, I'm going to go ahead and add in some Parmesan cheese. It was about a half a cup of Parmesan cheese. It calls for grated. I just had the bagged kind and it perfectly worked just fine. I just made sure to continue to stir that and smooth it out just so it wouldn't be like, I don't know, so that the coating that are in those bagged cheese is like a little bit of a flour or whatever they use, that it doesn't make my cheese sauce clumpy. And once that was all nice and melted and smooth, I went ahead and just added my shrimp back to that sauce. They're going to go ahead and reheat a little bit here and get nice and coated. I chopped up some fresh parsley, probably more than the 2 tablespoons that it called for, just because I really like parsley and I wanted that additional freshness in this sauce. And just stirred that all together, pretty easy. I went ahead and made some like garlic bread, like that bagged garlic bread I found it at Grocery Outlet like 30 minutes before I came home to make this meal. I stopped by there and they had it on clearance for like 40 cents. So that was great. Made that whole loaf up and made just a basic salad, just spring mix and dressing. I didn't have any tomatoes, which was a bummer, but it still was very, very good. This whole meal was delicious. We both love pasta. And that sauce was very good with that shrimp. You don't have to serve this with pasta though. You can definitely have this over rice. I believe in the original recipe they even said you could have it with mashed potatoes, but it was very delicious. Thanks so much for watching, friends. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and that little bell so you don't miss out on any future What's for Dinner videos. And I hope you all are having a great week.